Today we're picking up where we left off last time. We are talking The Sopranos season 2 this time. In this episode, let's start off by saying how amazing and how thrilled I was when It Was a Very Good Year by Frank Sinatra is like the opening song basically. Which I've actually said it already. That's my same reaction to when they used That's Life in the Joker film. I was like speechless. I mean, I know Frank Sinatra isn't like underground or anything, but it's still always really cool to hear those classics in movies and in TV. But anyway, we get Janice in. We get to meet Janice. From the beginning, the fact that Tony is kind of like, not too happy about it kind of gives us an idea of what to expect. And yeah, from the beginning, I was like, yeah, she definitely wants something. And then once she talks to their little sister, we get to see that, yeah, she's coming in for some moolah, for some money, you know. You know who comes back? Sal. Pussy. Pussy comes back in this episode, in this season. But he comes in with his claim of, listen, I have a really bad back. I had to go to Puerto Rico and get some shots, and then Tony believes him. They looked into it. But at the end of that episode, Tony looks at him while they're at that family barbecue, family party. And he just looks at him and it feels off. And he knows something is off. Even though, of course, Pussy's like, what am I supposed to do? You think I'm dumb? You think I'm dumb, bro? Like, I know you guys think that I did it. I know you guys think that I'm the informant. To be honest, this episode was, I don't know, I didn't know how to feel about it when it came to that whole scenario of Janice and Livia, because she just kind of feels for her mom, because she's like, you're old now, and I kind of just feel bad for you. You're going through all this health stuff. I hear that, Tony doesn't even want to mention you in his home. But I mean, at the same time, how is Janice not like, what the heck? Like, you trying to get your son killed? That's so weird, you know? She also has to take that into consideration, but no one's talking to Olivia about it. Like, it's kind of, I guess they don't want to upset her. Junior's still in jail. In this episode, we see him win his freedom, basically, but not really. He's just out of jail. He's under house arrest, and he has to wear an ankle bracelet. Because he made the mistake of, for some reason, also likening his imprisonment or likening just being at home with a fucking ankle bracelet to being a Jew during the Holocaust. I don't know. Maybe it's also to show just how out of touch he is, But anyway, I'm sure that's why it is, right? Just to be like, dude. I mean, we've seen him make those weird jokes. Not weird jokes, but like racist jokes. We also see how Junior feels guilty about Tony not speaking to Livia. And it's like 2 or 3 times that he tells him to go make peace with his mom. And Tony, of course, is like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. She doesn't exist to me. She's dead to me. And of course it gets to Junior, because Junior also realizes what happened. He's like, dang, like this really falls on me though, because I made that decision to do it. Livia told me that something should happen, not directly, but I made that decision to put that hit out on Tony. That was on me. So he only wants this reconciliation because he also wants to feel better. Because he feels terrible that he also came in between these two people that are actually mother and son, you know? But anyway, let's move on. In this episode, we see Tony eating at a restaurant, of course, with his boys, him and the boys having dinner, and Dr. Melfi's there with some of her girls, and they're like buzzing, right? So then they go and they happen to see Tony's table. And I don't even remember how it happens, honestly, but she acknowledges Tony and she's trying to talk to him. She's trying to be like, "How are you?" Because she's buzzing. And of course, when you're like buzzing, you're just not mad anymore, right? You're just not mad. It's just not that anymore. So she acts kind of weird. When she says bye to him, she says toodaloo, which is, yeah, it's weird. It's just not an expression that anyone says anymore. And it's very polite. And it's kind of like the fact that she questions it tells you enough. Because I'm trying to explain it too. It's like, it is weird. I wouldn't say toodaloo to anyone unless I was like, oh, trying to be nice, but also it's like awkward, you know? Why would she feel awkward about it if she really feels that? If it wasn't for treating him, one of her patients wouldn't have passed away, you know? But anyway, let's keep going. We also see Meadow. I was gonna say through no fault of her own, have a party at Livia's house, and she ends up having this party there. There's some girl that's puking. Tony himself has to go and pick up Meadow. Meadow starts getting upset because Tony and Carmela bring it up again. And she goes, "It's not my fault." I don't know, man. Told you, that hunter. That hunter. But anyway, we see Tony and Carmela, and obviously it's like the first time that she acts out like this or does something crazy to this like extent, to this level, because they don't know what to do about it. Then we see Janice just like stick her head in there and be like, "You guys should just leave her alone. She's just like a kid, man. Like, she's just like trying to be like free, bro. Like, you guys are just like not cool. You just don't get the young people." Which was so funny because later on in the episode, we see her freak the fuck out over the damage done to the home. And then she comes back and she tells Carmela and Tony that they need to punish her. And Meadow hears that. So at first, Janice was the cool aunt. And then what happens after that? In this episode, we also meet Richie April, who is the older brother of Jackie April, who had just passed away from cancer, who was the boss. Richie was in jail. He's finally out after 10 years. 10 years. We see him meet with Tony, and he wants to meet Christopher because Richie also happens to be Adriana's uncle. So Richie finds out that Christopher hit Adriana, so he's already like gunning for Christopher. So let's just remember that there's already bad blood there, okay? We see Richie, he's a hothead. He's a hothead. And then we find out that he had history with Janice. And don't you think it's so strange? Janice comes back. And then Richie comes back after being in jail. I know it's two completely different ways of coming back, but they still come back. And they find each other in yoga. Is that not insane? Don't you think that's crazy? And of course, there's still some lingering feelings there. So, with that being said, Richie Richie goes back to being like that street thug that he was, right? So Richie ends up going to a pizzeria, getting into this argument with Beansy, who's the owner of, a couple of these pizza places. And he's still kind of demanding money like he never left. Tony tells him to step off a little bit because things are kind of hot right now with the whole FBI coming in and trying to find stuff on them. And Richie doesn't get it. So then Richie goes back and he finds Beansy again, and he just like basically hits him with a car. He runs him over. The guy ends up in the hospital. He's like like his arms are up and his legs are up too. Like it looks like everything in his body is broken. We see all the guys sitting in the bada bing. In the bada bing. We see them sitting there and they're gonna watch The Godfather. The Godfather Part 2. So they're about to watch it. Paulie starts talking about his favorite part in The Godfather Part 2. And he says that his favorite part is that infamous Fredo betrayal kiss of death. And while he's talking about it, Pussy interrupts him. What does that mean? I just thought it was, of course, super, super funny, super clever. But let's continue on. In this episode, Tony, Polly, and Christopher are going to go to the motherland, to Italy. Tony is there to what he thinks is talk business about like importing cars and stuff with Don Vittorio. And what he gets instead is having to talk business with another guy named Nino. In between all that, he has an interpreter named Furio, who is the only guy there who speaks both Italian and English. But there's something going on with these interpretations too, because we don't see them. The face does not match what is being said. That's all I'm saying. It just doesn't make sense sometimes. We see Tony mention to Furio. We see him say to him, listen, I can't talk to this Nino guy. He's too insecure. I can't talk to someone like that. And it's true because Nino's like, I'm so fucking offended that you're saying that, blah, blah. It's like, bro, business is business. And Tony Soprano did also say, no offense. I just really thought I was going to come in here and talk to Don Vittorio. In this episode, Christopher is in Italy. He says he's going to see Mount Vesuvius. Never goes. He's getting high every day that he's there. Polly, I don't know if he's my favorite, but I have a very soft spot for Polly in my heart, So seeing him go to Italy and finally feeling like he's home, he can't even get the fucking prostitute that he has or call girl that he has. He can't even get her to show a little emotion to him. It sucks. That was actually like my biggest takeaway from this episode because I really felt for him. Will you imagine? I come from a background where both of my parents are from Mexico. So for me, I can't imagine to be like, oh, that's where I'm from. That's my calling. I want to go home. I want to visit it. Imagine going there, because I know I wouldn't fit in at all. Super Americanized, right? And it's the same thing with Polly. He's super Americanized. He gets there, he can't eat the food that they have because he's used to Italian food here, which is like pasta. Because that's all they give us here. Tony Soprano, when he's talking to Carmela on the phone, he goes, there's a lot of fish. That's not what you imagine Italy to be, but that's what it is. So I don't know, it was kind of sad seeing his expectations of Italy kind of crumble. And then at the end, when he tells Pussy, like, oh, any Italian that hasn't gone, like I fit right in, but any Italian that hasn't gone really has to make a big deal of going, like it's really important. But we know that he wasn't happy there. The Italians, they have no regard for women and children. They beat up some kid and his mom on the street in front of everyone. They slapped the lady. Furio just slaps her. Furio just slaps her. It was pretty intense, and the kid goes, oh, I want to work for you, and they go, well, that's not the way you do it. But at the same time, let's also look at it as like they have Don Vittorio. This dude is like super elderly. He's losing it, obviously, right? Because he's just repeating street names in America to Tony. But we see, like, we have to see it from that point of view too. Am I saying that it's acceptable that they beat up this kid and his mom? No. But I guess we can kind of see where that's coming from. Tony and Polly see that and they're like hesitating. They're like, hey. They're also saying, hey, that's a kid. He's just a kid. Because for them, they wouldn't have done that, right? Annalisa, who's Don Vittorio's daughter, who's basically the head of the business, the boss there. And Tony doesn't like that. He tells Furio, like, what the hell? You guys have a woman boss? And then he tries to do business with Annalisa. And then in one night, he touches her leg and is kind of getting flirty, and she gets uncomfortable. So she goes, picks up one of her kids, walks away. The next day, they're talking about business again. And then she starts I'm getting like vibes from her where she was trying to come on to him. And he turned her down. And I'm like, yes, Tony. Yes, this is business good for you, right? And that's that. Back at home, Carmela is meeting with Jackie's widow and Pussy's wife. Pussy's wife mentions that she actually was happier when Pussy was gone. That when Pussy got home and called out, I'm home, she was upstairs, and when she heard his voice, she wanted to vomit. And then we see that happen later on in the episode too, right? And then we see Carmela upstairs, and Tony comes home, and he yells out, I'm home, and Carmela just kind of stands there. But meanwhile, we also saw Carmela try to convince Pussy's wife, Rosalie. Her name is Angie, my bad. We see Carmela convince Rosalie, you know what? I know you're not going to leave him. And she's trying to get to her, and Rosalie's like, you don't understand. Like, I found a lump under my arm that could be breast cancer. And I told him, and he did not care. He didn't say a thing. How is she supposed to feel? It's a loveless marriage for sure, right? I don't know. So I think it's very insane to see that Carmela's pushing really hard for that. Carmela's pushing really hard for, like, marriage is sacred. You have to find a way to work through it. So that's when we get to see, like, the mind of Carmela come into play. Because it's the same thing when she talks to Janice about it. And Janice starts talking about, like, oh yeah, Pussy's wife, she shouldn't know what she was doing. And of course she's going to have a marriage like that. All these guys with their gumas and stuff. And Carmela takes it personally. And she's like, you're talking about me, aren't you? And Janice wasn't talking about her. It's just crazy that Rosalie and Carmela are basically the same. That's why she felt that she was talking about her. And then everyone is having their issues. And then at the end of the talk where Carmela's like, you were talking about me. You think I'm like this person that's, you think that I shouldn't be here. Like, you think that I sold my soul for this, which we know Carmela has said before. She did admit it to, what's his name? Father what? I can't remember his name. But anyway, she had told him, like, I sold my soul for this shit. But now she's telling Janice, you're telling me I sold my soul for this shit, basically, right? And Janice is like, no. I'm talking about Pussy's wife. So I think the fact that she can also, like, what's the saying? If the bra fits. But yeah, I just thought that was insane. But then Carmela goes, you're dating Richie. Richie's like so old school. He's like as old school as they come. So she laughs in her face and she walks away, but she also understands that she did take what Janice said to heart because she feels about that herself. She feels the same way because she knows that she did. Pussy talking to his handler, I guess, his FBI handler, Skip. We see them talk. They're at a party store somewhere. They come across this guy who's like an Elvis impersonator. I can't remember his name right now. I'll put it right here. And he starts asking Pussy questions. And then he goes, why are you even here? Aren't your kids all grown up? Who's this guy? Oh, he's from where? Oh, I'm from there. That's crazy. You know where that title comes from? Like you know where that city name comes from? So he knows something is fishy. And then he leaves. He asks no more questions and he leaves. And then he gets stuck in Pussy's mind. And Pussy has a dream about him. He's talking in his sleep about killing this dude. So he ends up going to his house and killing this dude with a hammer, right? Is it a hammer? Is it a hammer? But yeah, and that's that. Episode 5 is called Big Girls Don't Cry. This one is a lot about Christopher. Adriana ends up buying him some acting classes, and he goes, and he's really fucking good. Cause you know what? Cause he has it in here, man. He's so good. He scares himself in one of the scenes. Cause he did good. Like, why else would he storm out? Okay? He cries. He's talking about his dad. He's playing who's he playing? He's playing James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. And he's doing that scene where he's like holding on to the dad's legs and then he's crying. Oh my god, I was getting teary-eyed during that too because I was like, wow, this is so good, acting on acting. Like, that was so good. Everyone feels the same. Everyone's clapping, and then some dude yells out, how do you get yourself to cry like that? And he gets mad and he storms out. And then later on, he ends up beating up the dude that played his dad in that same scene. And he just quits after that because he didn't like that he was feeling stuff. Because why is he always getting high? Because he doesn't want to feel shit, right? So anyway, that's the end of that. We see Furio coming in from Italy because that was part of the deal too. Tony gave really good prices to Annalisa, and he also got Furio to come in and work for him. Because, of course, good help is hard to find in the States. Because everyone goes to the cops, everyone is like talking like this instead of not ratting on their friends now, you know. But anyway, we see Furio coming in. He does a job, no problem. Beats up the owner of a tanning salon joint, which also, is a place where things happen between adults, whatever. It's like a whorehouse at the same time. That's what I'm trying to say. But he also, because Tony knew, right? Because Tony saw him Tony was like, this dude is down to like beat up women and children. Let me use that. Let me use that because this dude's wife is a problem. And I don't feel good about putting my hands on women. And I don't think any of my guys are down to do it either because we don't do that. But we have this dude, Furio from Italy, and he's down to do it. Let's get him in there. And he does. He fucking whacks the crap out of both of them. Okay? But at least he has someone that gets the job done. That's all he needed. With Furio in, Polly and Silvio are bumped up a notch. But Pussy's not. Because why? Because why? I don't know. But we know for sure that it's probably because he left. You just don't do that. So for him to also expect a promotion? Come on, bro. It doesn't matter. You left without saying a fucking thing. And then you come back with this excuse. And yeah, it checks out. But you're also part of this fucking group. You can't just leave like that. Because we remember Tony was super, super bummed out about that too, right? He was bummed out about the whole situation. So you know what? Pussy doesn't get promoted. Pussy gets mad. And he complains about it. Whatever. We also see Janice and Richie together. Like, they're now living in Livia's house. They sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. Tony is mad because Janice is using the house as security for a loan. And she tells Tony, when she's confronted about it, that she needs money to fix up the place. But Richie's there. Richie's sleeping with her. Richie and Janice are there together. And this is what happens. Richie turns to Janice while Tony is there. And he says, hey, I'll loan you the money. In front of Tony. Why did he do that? That is kind of like a big power play. In front of her brother. You know? Instead of having her be accountable and be like, what the hell are you doing, bro? You're not even communicating any of this to Tony. We also see Tony and how he is just starting to bottle stuff up again. So he starts going to see Hesh. And he starts talking to Hesh. And he's like, Hesh. He starts using Hesh as like a friend. But he really just needs someone to take Dr. Melfi's place. Because, of course, Dr. Melfi's not treating him anymore still. Hesh, that old timer, of course, he starts talking about his own fucking life, like every time. And Tony gets mad. He's like, what the fuck, man? You don't want to hear the rest of my fucking story? So, I mean, it's funny. That is funny. But we also get to see how he really did need someone to talk to about his problems. Because he has a lot of them, you know? But, yeah. And then Hesh lets him know that his dad used to get anxiety attacks too, panic attacks also, which is just very interesting. Because then he's not alone. Now he doesn't feel like a humongous freak. It's not just happening to him, right? Is that what you're getting from it? Because that's what I got from it. It's not cool, but it's nice to be like, wow, like, my parent used to get this, like, I'm not just a fucking weirdo. So he probably feels a little bit good that he found that information out. But out of all people Hesh had to tell him, Junior, Livia, it's because they wanted to sweep this stuff under the rug, right? And finally, Dr. Melfi decides to take Tony back as a patient. And Tony ends up going to see her again. She gave him the option to go see her again. And she said that she was going to leave a spot open for him. And he goes. Because good for him, he also does still realize that he needs the help. We meet Tony's friend, Davey. And he has like a gambling problem. He owns a business too, a sporting goods store. But he has a gambling problem. So that gets him in a lot of trouble this episode, right? He's losing money. He already owes Richie money. And of course, who wants to mess with Richie when we know that Richie has a really bad temper? Not me, baby. Not me. And then there's this big game that Junior used to take care of, where it was these guys with big money. Frank Sinatra Jr. is there gambling. You know, what are they playing? Are they playing poker? Oh, I didn't even really pay attention that well. But they're in this really big game. And this Davy guy finds a way to sneak in through like Tony trying to be a good friend. Tony's like, fine, go in. I'll spot you some money. Go play. Next thing you know, Tony falls asleep. This dude is in for like $45,000. Ridiculous. So what is he gonna do? Of course, he has to find him. And this Davy guy is like, we're friends. I'm good for the money. Tony beats him up. This dude ends up taking his kid's car, which, by the way, his kid is friends with Meadow. And Meadow and his kid just happen to be having a choir recital where they're doing like a duet. It's crazy. So he takes his kid's car. Tony takes it and is like, fine, I'll accept this as a form of payment. I'm going to give it to my daughter. And then he gives it to Meadow. And then Meadow is like, after she gets excited, of course, she goes, this is Eric's car. And of course she gets upset. And of course Eric is upset. And Eric confronts her at that night of the choir show. And he goes, you know what, dude? Screw you and your mafia family. Is that what he says? He doesn't say that verbatim, but something like that. And she gets upset. He's walking away. He walks away, leaving her with no duet partner, obviously. So she has to do a solo. But it's so funny because in the beginning of the show, we see her ask her choir teacher for a solo for herself since it'll look good for her college admissions. So I guess be careful what you wish for. And then Junior starts talking about how him and Tony's dad had another brother who was intellectually disabled. So we're getting a lot of genetic stuff coming in here. A lot of other questions, information that just brings up more questions, you know? Earlier in the first season, Christopher had mentioned to Tony, my cousin's fiance, she works for the movies, whatever. She says that mafia stories or mob stories are always hot, so I can write some stuff and sell it to her, which is, Tony gets upset, of course, because he's not into that type of stuff. So now we get to meet his cousin and his cousin's fiance, Amy. They're at this, is it a restaurant or like a club? A restaurant, a club, whatever. They're sitting down, and Christopher's with Adriana, Greg, and Amy. And there's some rowdy guys behind Amy that keep bumping into her. And Greg is like, oh. And Christopher steps in after it happens, the second or third time? He whispers something in the guy's ear. The guy grabs his friends, and they all just leave. And you see Amy, and she looks at Christopher like, oh, wow, thank you for saving me. Because she can't take a fucking bump to her arm, and they can't just move. But whatever. And then Amy and Christopher go on this movie set. Jon Favreau is there. So we get to see him. Like, it's actually him, which is so cool. And they talk about swingers, which is so cool too. But anyway, Christopher pitches an idea for one of the actresses to yell out this Italian word for cunt, because they're having a hard time with the dialogue in the movie. And then that comment kind of allows him to integrate with this group of people, which is all the cast and crew of the movie that is being filmed. He ends up going to lunch with Amy and John. All three of them are sitting at this pizzeria. Christopher starts telling both of them about this story. The story of one of the guys that he knows that ended up throwing acid on a woman that had a dick. Transvestite. So he ends up throwing acid on this girl, and she ends up being like disfigured. And then later on, we find that John ended up using that story in his script, even though Christopher had said that it was just between them. He said he couldn't really tell anyone that story. And then after John steals that story, Christopher doesn't hear from him again. And then in between all this, he sees Amy in her room. Of course, we can already tell that she's kind of like flirty, because of course she was like, oh my god, I cannot believe he just threw out the suggestion out there in front of all these people. How hot that, like, he just like threw this suggestion out, and obviously everyone loved it. It was so real and authentic. And she sleeps with him. And she is engaged to Christopher's cousin. The whole scenario, all of that made me feel so icky. Because I was like, bro, like, you know Adriana, right? Dude, dream girl right there. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's pushing for you. She got you these classes, man. So, anyway, that was pretty messed up. And I think it happens like more than once. And then, what happens after that? We also see AJ. He's just depressed. He starts talking about Nietzsche and how he thinks that life is absurd. He starts saying, what's the point of living? He takes his mom's car, scratches the whole side, the mirror falls off. Pussy talks to him. That was the heartbreaking part right there. When Pussy has to talk to AJ at his, his communion? Whatever. And he's upstairs. And he's wearing a wire. And he's upstairs. He has to talk to AJ because he's like his, godfather or something like that. And he's like, AJ, listen, your dad, I know you don't think he's very cool, but that dude is down for whatever. He was there for me when my sister, who got very sick, died. And that was so sad, because while he's telling AJ the story, it makes him also realize that Tony really was there for him in a very, very hard time in his life. So then we see him later on just sobbing in the restroom, and we hear him sobbing in the restroom. So that was pretty sad. And then when AJ went to go see Livia, that was interesting. Because she basically feels the same way. I feel like she didn't make it better at all, because that's why AJ ends up saying like, oh, nothing in this life matters. Even grandma says the same thing. And I was like, wow, who thought that was a good idea? When we already know how she is. Like, everyone used to make jokes about how Livia just dwells in negativity, right? And everyone knows that. Artie, everyone. And in the end of the episode, we see Tony tell Christopher, listen, you either fucking stay here and you're in all the fucking way, or you leave. Because he has no time for people that are going to be half-assing it, when literally people's lives are on the line at this point. So, Christopher goes outside, sits down, ponders it for a bit, and then he walks back in, and he has cemented his loyalty to Tony Soprano. Why? Because he finally had a taste of the life that he wanted. He was over there with these people, this cast, this crew. He was in there for a moment. But then we kind of see and we realize that all these people want is to take and take and take and take and take from him. His suggestions, they steal them, they take them. Well, his suggestions, they take them. His stories, they steal them. And then they leave him high and dry. He really actually liked Amy. And she was like, all of a sudden, she goes, you know what, Christopher, this isn't a good idea. Like, we both know that that wasn't, like, the way to go about it. And I was like, you bukyak. That's fucked up. You know? Because she did lead him on. Like, I saw that from the outside. And I was like, dude, you are playing with fire, man. You just got excited because you were like, wow, this guy's so dangerous and he like stands up for me and stuff. You know? But it's like, you're engaged to his cousin, man. It was really strange. The whole thing was really strange. But anyway, Christopher felt like he was in there a little bit, was taken right out. So, I leave you with these thoughts, all the thoughts that I just gave you. And I say, I'll see you next time for part 2 of season 2 of The Sopranos. Thanks for watching.